Joining us right now, Congressman Ritchie Torres, representing New York's 15th district in the Bronx. Congressman, great to see you. Welcome back to Up Close.
It's an honor to be here.
First up, let's get your thoughts. What was your initial impression of the selection of Mr. Walz to join the ticket?
Well, Tim Walz is an exceptional choice. You know, the road to the presidency runs through the industrial Midwest, and Tim Walz has a proven ability to appeal to the independents and moderates that we will need to win the election. He's one of the most beloved figures in politics. It's rare to have someone who's been in politics as long as Mr. Walz and has no enemies. He had the support of Bernie Sanders on the left and Joe Manchin on the right. And so the fact that he could appeal to both Bernie Sanders and Joe Manchin speaks to the breadth of his political appeal, and his greatest asset is his likability.
And of course, Republicans are criticizing the pick. They're saying, and Speaker Johnson even said that one of the favorites, at least we thought one of the favorites, the Pennsylvania Governor Shapiro, was perhaps at the top of the list. And Speaker Johnson said that his Jewish heritage and his stance on the Israel-Hamas war was the reason why he was not picked. Do you think that played any part in why Vice President Harris decided not to go with him?
Absolutely not. The selection of Tim Walz was a deeply personal decision for the vice president. It had to do with the chemistry between Vice President Harris and Governor Walz. I will say this, though, there was certainly an undercurrent of anti-Semitism that drove the smear campaign against Tim Walz, but that had nothing to do with the Harris campaign.
Well, to that point, in anti-Semitism and across the country and, of course, around the world, and now we know the developments happening in Israel, it appears, unfortunately, this conflict could widen with the inclusion of Iran retaliating for the Hamas leader's assassination recently. Your thoughts on what the Biden administration is doing right now, and what would you ask the president to do to try to bring not only an end to the violence, but also to bring the hostages home?
Look, what is urgently needed is President Biden's ceasefire, which would secure the release of the hostages and end the war and bring some measure of calm to the region. We have to do everything we can to prevent the outbreak of a war between Israel and Hezbollah. Such a war would be mutually catastrophic. It would entangle both Iran and the United States, resulting in a regional conflagration. So it's in the national security interest of the United States to do everything we can to prevent the outbreak of regional war in the Middle East.
The U.S. among 3 countries, including Qatar and Egypt, calling for renegotiations or more negotiations on that ceasefire possibility this next week. Of course, we'll follow that closely. A couple of things. We have about 3 minutes left, but I wanted to hit some issues here close to home. I know that the Bronx is dealing with, again, an increase in crime. This past week, we had the shooting at St. James Park where 2 gunmen rode up on a moped and sprayed bullets into a park, just frightening scenes that we're seeing unfold there. Recently, I know you introduced the bill with the bodega security measures put into place. But what is your plan, or how can you attack, especially the gun violence that we're seeing in the Bronx?
Look, the Bronx is ground zero for gun violence, youth violence, and gang violence in New York City. More must be done to combat the crisis of gun violence. It's become the leading cause of death of young people in American society. You know, ultimately, the gun safety laws that we have here in New York State and New York City can only take us so far, because guns can easily cross borders. And so what is desperately needed are national standards of gun safety, right? Every gun should be registered and safely stored. Every gun owner should be professionally trained, and every gun sale should be subject to a comprehensive and thorough background check. What we need is common sense to govern gun regulations in the United States.
I want to ask you an economic question because, of course, that's top of mind for so many people, especially here in New York. And as we head towards the election, so many policies are being tossed around, but we've seen a volatile stock market, especially in this past week. I know you sent a letter to the Fed asking for them to lower the rates now. What is your ask, and what are you hoping happens as we head into November?
Look, the Fed is a doctor prescribing medicine to the economy, but the difference between medicine and poison is dosage, and the dosage is too high. Interest rates are too high. We've seen a level of volatility in the stock market not seen since the 2020 pandemic and the 2008 financial crisis. Unemployment has risen to the highest level in nearly 3 years. the time has come for the Fed to cut interest rates. The longer the Fed waits to cut interest rates, the greater the risk of a recession, the greater the risk of significant unemployment. So we must prevent it and cut interest rates now.
And in the final minute, to that point, what are some other things that, especially in Congress, what can be done as people are just struggling, not only with the groceries, but the energy costs and just what it takes to live, particularly in New York City?
We have to focus like a laser on addressing the cost of living. One of the most important achievements in the Biden administration was the expansion of the child tax credit, which cut child poverty by 50%. And so I'm a strong advocate for restoring the expansion of the child tax credit so that we can enable families here in the Bronx, here in New York, to afford the crushing cost of living.
Congressman Ritchie Torres from the Bronx, we appreciate your perspective, and thanks for being on Up Close.
Always a pleasure.